at lunchtime, there's what's called a roof tap, and it's very, very common in places like Gaza, where there'll be a smaller strike on a roof, almost to sort of warn the people inside that building. And I'd actually headed down to the ministry to see if there was anything worth photographing in the aftermath of those drone strikes and that initial attack. And just as I arrived and pulled out my camera, these jets started screaming overhead. The noise is just incredible. And then there were 3 or 4 enormous airstrikes about 150 meters away from me. So, dust and debris just flying through the air. The sound of it is completely overwhelming. And when the dust cleared, what you're able to see is that the headquarters for the Ministry of Defence, the General Staff building, has just been cleaved in two. It's a 4 or 5 story building, and there are huge, huge holes just straight down the middle of it now.
We're looking at some of your vision now that speaks to that moment. What has the reaction been by local Syrians?
I mean, people are, they're shocked and they're afraid, but there's a great deal of anger, but there's also almost a bit of resignation in a way. We've seen a series of Israeli airstrikes on Syria since President Ahmed al-Sharaa and HTS and the allied armed groups that came with him from Idlib took control of the country. There's been hundreds of strikes in December, destroying almost all of the Syrian army's hardware, helicopters, planes, missiles, the Syrian Navy on the coast. And so it's put them in quite a difficult position where the country doesn't really have air defense. There's not a great deal that they can do about this. And so there's a lot of anger from the population, and a lot of fear. But I suppose an understanding that actually their president is now in an incredibly difficult position where there's not really a military response open to him.
Israel's motivations here, what do you make of those? Why now? Why this sudden force?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that both the Israeli government and the Syrian government have taken advantage of something of an opportunity in the last couple of days. So there's been this ongoing tension in Sweda between the Druze minority and some Sunni Bedouin tribes. There's been incidents of kidnapping and isolated killings over the last couple of months. And then over the weekend, that really escalated. And the Syrian government on Monday said enough is enough. We can't have this going on. And they sent the military into the region, which they haven't been able to do in the last 6 months. They haven't controlled that area. And so for them, it was an opportunity to establish territorial control over another part of the country. And for the Israelis, it was also an opportunity to then step in and say, well, this is unacceptable to us. We're not willing to have this Syrian government who we say we don't trust operating in great force on our border. And so by saying that they're stepping in to protect the Druze, it also provides an opportunity to weaken and destabilize a government that, despite the fact that they're in negotiations, despite the fact that the Syrian government has indicated some willingness and some openness to normalizing relations with Israel, even perhaps going as far as signing onto the Abraham Accords in the future, the Israeli government really appears to be doing everything they can to undermine that relationship right now.
What does it mean for broader stability in the region? We've got Israel waging wars with Iran in Gaza and now this latest escalation. What does it mean for stability? I mean, we've heard from the US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, calling for calm and de-escalation. Where does it leave things?
Well, again, the options really for escalation on the side of the Syrian government are quite limited, and it has put Sharaa in a difficult position. There are many Syrian, civilians, the Syrian public, and especially the fighters, the more conservative Islamist fighters who are a huge part of his power base, incredibly unhappy about this. So it puts an enormous amount of domestic pressure on him. We know that there are elements in Syria who believe that Sharaa has sold out the revolution, have sold out the Islamist ideals that he fought for. And so there's a danger that if he's not seen to have a strong enough response to something like this, that he'll see attacks, from his right flank. We know that there's been assassination plots against him. I think that would be incredibly destabilizing. They've only really just got a grip on power here in Syria. And it has stabilized things quite a bit, to be honest. We've seen the closing down of smuggling routes of weapons from Iran to Hezbollah in Lebanon. Many of those the things that Israel is ostensibly worried about have actually ceased here in Syria in the last 6 months.